We're picking up with Act 3, and I'm going to back up for just maybe 5 minutes. The very end of Scene 3. When Hamlet comes upon his stepfather praying, okay? We talked a little bit the other day about Claudius's soliloquy, and he forces himself down onto his knees to pray, to beg forgiveness and such. And that's when Hamlet walks by the open door and sees him. And he says, "Now might I do it, pet." Okay? Your gloss, opportunely. It means now, immediately, easily. Now he is praying, and now I'll do it. So, have you ever had the experience of, if somebody says, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it right now, and then they don't, they just, or watch a TV show. Well, we saw it with Good Man is Hard to Find. Bailey tells his children to quit haranguing him, etc., but if you don't stop, I'm going to turn this car off, etc. Now I might do it, and I'll do it, pet. And so it goes to heaven. And so am I revenged. Wait, that would be scanned. And you got a gloss down there for scanned. Scanned means looking at a line of poetry or a poem and determining its meter, how many accented and unaccented syllables there are, and what their pattern is to determine if it's hexameter, etc. Determining the rhyme scheme, figuring out what it means. So he's like, wait a second. If I do all this, I need to think about this. What did he tell us in that speech that began, "Oh, what a rogue and peasant slave am I"? That soliloquy after meeting the players. It ends with, thought does what? It takes away the native hue of resolution and overcasts the face with paleness. It waters down and takes away the resolve. That would be scanned. I'm thinking about it. The villain kills my father. Okay? And for that is in return for that, I, his sole son, do the same villain sin to heaven. Why? Because Hamlet is thinking, if I kill him now, when he's in the act of prayer, that is a religious act, a ceremonial act, and because it is a good act, it is a good deed, it draws down the grace of God upon the doer of the deed. Especially in Catholic doctrine, much, much less so in, the other day in Calvin over here, in Calvinist doctrine. In some Protestant circles, it does, but definitely not in Calvinism. Calvinism, there's nothing you can do to draw down the grace of God. You either get it or you don't. Irresistible grace part, okay? So he's thinking, if I kill him now while he's praying, he doesn't go to purgatory. He goes to heaven. Because he will die, quote unquote, in a state of grace by it being in the very act of praying. So, this is higher in salary. I mean, I'm paying him for this, essentially. This is not revenge. He took my father grossly, full of bread, enjoying his worldly pleasures. Okay. Literally, when Hamlet Sr. was killed, what was he doing? He was sleeping. He wasn't caught in the act of some heinous sin. But he means bloated, full of his sins. All right? With all his crimes broad blown, as flush as May. Why May and not October? You can look out the window at these maples and such. They're all bare. They got little tiny green sprouts. In another month and a half, those are going to be in full leaf. That is, fully in bloom with his sins. And how his audit stands, who knows save heaven? That is, where my father is, or what his judgment is or / will be, only God knows. See, in one sense, I haven't pointed this out to my other classes, didn't this morning, my first one. In one sense, Hamlet's a pretty free thinker, okay? Because most Catholics at this point, many Catholics, maybe I shouldn't say most, would probably be more than willing to say who's going to heaven and who isn't. And many Protestants would. Hamlet's saying, it's up to God, not up to me. But in our circumstance and course of thought, that is, from our perspective, down here on earth, what? 'Tis heavy with him. Ooh, he's in dire straits. From down here, the earthly perspective, it looks like Dad died full of sin. And am I then revenged to take him in the purging of his soul? Notice, all this talk about God, talking about salvation, being taken to heaven and such, and Hamlet doesn't think for a moment, in this scene at least, whether or not revenge is proper, whether or not revenge is called for. Because within both the Catholic tradition, the Protestant tradition, even the Orthodox tradition, revenge is never called for. You go back to the Old Testament saying, vengeance is mine, says the Lord. That it doesn't belong to anybody else. So the ghost told me to do this. When he is fit and seasoned for his passage, is it revenge to kill Claudius now when he is fit? That is, made ready, in season. He's got all his bags packed. His metaphorical bags are all of his sins, and they're packed for what? To stay down here. So that when he leaves devoid of sin. Notice what this is presuming on Hamlet's part about Claudius. He thinks Claudius is praying for forgiveness and everything. He doesn't know that to be the case. He just walks by and sees Claudius kneeling, I like to think, because of the world of the play, he's probably kneeling in front of a little altar. So it accentuates that religious aspect, okay? No, this is not revenge. Up, sword, and so he puts his sword back in its sheath, and know thou a more horrid hint, your gloss, seizing, or more probably occasion of seizure. Wait for the right time. When he is drunk asleep, why? Like my father. Wouldn't it be fitting for Claudius to die the same way Hamlet Sr. died? Or in his rage? Or in the incestuous pleasure of his bed? A game, cards, dice, swearing. Why? Swearing's a sin. James says in the book of James, the tongue is the most powerful evil in the world. Why? Because of what it gives out, not what it takes in. Or about some act that has no relish of salvation. Relish. What's relish? What's the condiment relish that you put on a hot dog? It makes it taste better. It makes it more palatable. If you relish something, you like it, you appreciate it. And let it be caught when there's nothing that can smack of salvation or grace. Then, when I could catch him in that kind of situation, trip him. Why? So that he falls headlong into hell and his heels are kicking up against heaven. So that his soul may be as damned and black as hell whereto it goes. My mother stays. Stays there means waits. This physic but prolongs thy sickly days. In other words, this physic this prayer that Claudius is doing, Hamlet says, it's just buying you a few hours/days. Hamlet leaves, and that's when we hear the end of Claudius's prayer or speech. My words fly up, my thoughts remain below. Words without thoughts, never to heaven go. Thoughts means what here? Belief, sincerity. Okay? Words without sincerity, without the belief attendant behind them, mean nothing. Hamlet doesn't hear that part, though. If Hamlet had just stuck around for a few seconds and heard that, he could have gone, stabbed him in the back. But he doesn't. Scene 4, Queen's Closet. Gertrude and Polonius enter. Closet just means bedroom. Polonius, he's on his way, he's coming straight. Look, you lay home to him. Lay home to him. That means put him to the test. Put the thumb screws on him, metaphorically speaking. Push him, Queen. Make him reveal what the problem is. Tell him his pranks have been too broad to bear with. They're too generally exposed. They're too heinous. And that your grace has screened and stood between much heat and him. Tell him that you are bearing the brunt caused by his problems. Like, the king is angry at you, Gertrude. Why? What will that do? Oh, Hamlet, you don't know what I'm going through for all your problems. Oh, I'm sorry, Mother. How can I? Okay. And we hear, Mother, Mother, Mother. Polonius hides behind the arras. Now, Mother, what's the matter? Meaning, why do you want to see me? Hamlet, thou hast thy father much offended. Thou hast thy father, thy, much offended. Mother, you have my father much offended. Why did she use thou and Hamlet uses you? Shakespeare's day, both forms of pronouns were still available. Okay? They weren't still both in everyday, common, ordinary usage. By the time Shakespeare writes this play, almost everybody are using the Y forms. You, your, ye, every now and then. Okay? The thou, thee, and thine had pretty much gone out of fashion. The reason the King James uses thou, thee, and thine is it wants to be intentionally archaic. It wants to hearken back so that it's not colloquial. It's not like everyday standard English, right? So the two forms have different registers of meaning, okay? So you use the thou, thee, and thine form from older people to younger people, okay? For a socially superior person to a socially inferior person, and that socially inferior can be social status inferior or it can be age status. So socially superior person could use it to someone same status but younger, right? And then upper class among equals. So you're up here, you would use that among each other. The Y forms are used to indicate politeness and formality. And by the formality, also included there's distancing yourself, emotionally distancing from the person you're addressing, okay? The Y form is used to superiors. That is, you use it to address someone who is your social superior or someone who is your age superior, right? And upper class among equals, just like this one, okay? Notice, as an example of this, how today we don't often understand why these were used. For example, if you look at the King James Bible, all the prayers to God, thou, thee, and thine. And you'll hear churches today and pastors and preachers today talk about thy will, etc. Why? not because we are socially superior to God, or God is younger than us, not because we are older than God, and not because we're upper class equals. We're not equal to God. It's used today not because it's King James English, but it's because it's thought today that is this formal to address someone much, much, much. It's just the opposite. We should be using, in those kinds of prayers, the Y form. Because you're addressing, obviously, someone much, much, much senior. So notice what Shakespeare does, and he does this in several plays. He switches back and forth between these two in the same scene. So look at the scene again. Hamlet, thou hast thy father much offended. Well, here we could say it's easily, they're both upper class, right? Queen and king, queen and prince. So that's possible. Socially superior to inferior. Well, Hamlet is her son. That's a social superior-inferior relationship. Older to younger, obviously. So that makes sense. Hamlet, however, doesn't reply with the TH form indicating equality. He says, Mother, you have my father much offended. Among equals, to superior age-wise, true, but Hamlet's also introducing this politeness in this formality. And what a lot of people think is he's socially distancing himself from her. Like she's got the plague. He's going to back up, they're required 6 feet and put on the mask, as it were. Come, you answer with an idle tongue. She picked up on what he did. Oh, we're going to play that game. I use the TH form, you use the Y form, fine. I'll use the Y form. You want to be socially distant? Fine. You answer with an idle tone. Use that tone with me, boy. Go. You question with a wicked tongue. Now, Hamlet. She backs off. What are you doing, Hamlet? What's wrong? Why are you doing this? What's the matter now? Okay, he began with, what's the matter, mother? Have you forgot me? No, by the rood. By the cross. Not so. How does he know who she is? Okay, remember there's another scene similar to that when someone says, do you know me, my lord? And Hamlet says, Faith, you're a fishmonger. Do you know me? She essentially asks. He says, yes, you're the queen, your husband's brother's wife. He doesn't say, you're the queen, my mother. You are your husband's brother's wife. And what does he say without literally saying it? You incestuous slut. And would it were not so, you are my mother. Nay, then I'll set those to you that can speak. That is, if you're not going to talk to me, then I'll bring someone who can. Hamlet, come, sit you down. You shall, no, you're not going anywhere. Take a seat, Mom. You shall not budge, you shall not go, till I set you up a glass, where you may see the inmost part of you. If you remember Friday, I went back for a moment to talk about that scene in scene 3, I think it's scene 3, nope, scene 2, where Hamlet's talking to the 3 actors, and he tells us what the purpose of playing is, to hold a mirror up to nature, and to show virtue her image, and to show folly or vice its image. Okay? Here he says, no, mother, I'm going to hold a mirror up to you. For what purpose? Where you may see the inmost part of you. What is her inmost part? Wake up. Go away. Her heart. What wilt thou do? Thou wilt not murder me. Help, ho, ho. And we hear somewhere behind the curtain. What? Ho, help, help, help. Hamlet drawing doesn't mean he draws the curtain. That's the way some students have read it. He pulls his sword out. How now? A rat. Right? Because rats would live behind curtains. They don't, just wander out in front of everybody. And he says, dead for a ducat, and stabs through the curtain. Does Hamlet know who he's killing? No, he can't see him. Polonius falls and dies. Behind the arras. He's still lying there behind the arras. At this point, Hamlet still doesn't know who he's killed. We hear Polonius, oh, I am slain. Queen, what have you done? Oh, Hamlet, she says. Hamlet, nay, I know not. That is, I don't know what I've done. What he really means is, I know not who I've done. Is it the king? Please, God, please, God, please, God. Oh, what a rash and bloody deed is this. Rash. Why so? Did Hamlet think about it? Did he meditate it? Did he premeditate it? Nope. Why'd he kill him? A bloody deed? You want to talk about bloody deeds? Almost as bad, good mother, as kill a king and marry with his brother. Notice what Hamlet has just suggested, or just implied. He doesn't say, almost as bad, good mother, as kill a king and marry with his wife. See, kill a king and marry with his wife would imply who is Hamlet speaking about? Claudius. But he's not. He's speaking about his mother. What has he suggested or implied his mother did? Kill her husband. Did Gertrude kill her husband? No. Is there anything in the play that suggests Gertrude was in on the plot? No. None. Kill a king? Aye, lady, it was my word. And that's when he lifts up the curtain. Thou wretched, rash, intruding fool, farewell. Now, what does farewell mean? Literally, the fare, travel. You pay a fare on a bus, that's what you pay to travel. It means travel well. That is a nice sending off. Because what else can you say? Go to hell. It doesn't say that. Or you can say goodbye, which means what? Literally. God be with you. That's what goodbye literally means. Okay? It's an abbreviated form of that phrase. Thou wretched, rash, intruding fool, farewell. I took thee for thy better. Didn't intend to kill you. Take thy fortune. Hamlet's saying here, I'm the instrument of fortune. In a moment, 30 minutes, he's going to say something else, okay, about Polonius and maybe where Polonius is going, etc. Why did he call him a rash, intruding fool? Who was invited to the room? Hamlet was. Hamlet thought he was going for what purpose? Heart to heart with mom. Only mom put on the recording device, so to speak. Happened to be named Polonius. What advice, what words did Hamlet tell Ophelia that Polonius heard? He asks her, where's your father? At home. Tell him to stay in his own house, where he will not play the fool outside, or where he can play the fool safely. Rash, intruding fool. Thou find'st to be too busy is some danger. What does that mean, to be too busy? You should have a gloss there. because we don't use it in this sense anymore. The original word that is today business was busyness, B-U-S-Y, and then later I-N-E-S-S. And it meant not going to work every day, getting a paycheck, time clock. It meant sticking your nose in other people's business. To be too busy looking around what everybody else is doing. Remember, the kingdom is the place where everyone is an observer. And she's sitting there wringing her hands. How do we know? Because Hamlet says, leave wringing of your hands. Stop it. Why do people do this? They're tense, they're fidgety, they feel like there's danger. Why? He wants you to stop wringing your hands because he's going to do some other kind of wringing. Sit you down and let me wring your heart, like wringing a wet rag and getting everything out of it. But think of her heart as in her hands, and he's going to do what? Squeeze it. Why? For so I shall, if it be made of penetrable stuff, if it can be broken into, if damned custom have not brazed it so, that it be proof and bulwark against sense. If your custom, your habit, and it's, notice, damned custom, has not made it so hard that it can't be broken. Who famously, Old Testament, if you have any idea, had a quote-unquote hardened heart? You know, Easter's coming up this week. Easter is what? It's the New Testament version of, and it happens during what season in the Jewish calendar? Passover. The Passover is the leaving of the Israelites from Egypt. Well, why'd they have to leave? Because God hardened Pharaoh's heart. Pharaoh wouldn't release the Jews. Okay? If your heart isn't so hardened, he says, I want to do something with you, Mom. She's like, what have I done? What are you talking about? That thou darest wag thy tongue and noise so rude against me. Again, that's her way of saying, don't you use that tone with me, young man. So what have you done? Such an act that blurs the grace and blush of modesty, calls virtue hypocrite, takes off the rose from the fair forehead of an innocent love and sets a blister there. An innocent love, like a fair, innocent young maiden. And rather than having this beautiful glow, she's got a big old boil on her forehead. Not a zit, a boil caused by a disease. Boils on the outside, Shakespeare's day and earlier, pretty much always indicate there's something rotten inside. Okay? Makes marriage vows as false as dicers' oath, that is gamers, not video game, but cards and such. Oh, such a deed as from the body of contraction plucks the very soul, and sweet religion makes a rhapsody of words. Heaven's face does glow, or the solidity and compound mass with heated visage, as against the doom is thought. What? What have I done, Hamlet? Because he hasn't said anything yet. And he holds up for her a portrait. Or possibly two portraits. If it's a portrait, then it's a portrait of two brothers. If it's two portraits, then it's a painting of one and a painting of the other. And while I'm doing this, if you would, sign under the 2nd of 2030. Portraits of Hamlet Sr., Claudius. And he echoes back to his first soliloquy where he talks about his father being Hyperion to this satyr. He says, see what a grace was seated on this brow, forehead. Hyperion's curls, locks, the front of Jove, the face of the highest God himself. An eye like Mars, that is a warrior, to threaten and command, a station like the herald Mercury. Your station tells you a manner of standing. And I think what was Mercury's job? Mercury was the messenger of the gods. So he's in his bluffs, getting ready to deliver that message. New lighted on a heaven-kissing hill, a combination and a form indeed, where every god did seem to set a seal to give the world assurance of a man. In other words, you look at my dead father in this image, and it's like, this God gave this to him, and this God gave this to him, and this God gave. This is, he means, the image of a man. The image of all men. This was your husband. Now look at this. Here is your husband. Here is your husband. This was your husband. Like a mildewed ear. You've got a thing for Genesis. It's corn wrapped in its husk that you pick off the plant, and you think it's fine. You pick off the corn stalk, you pull the ear off, you pull the leaf, and it's rotted. Just bleh. Blasting his wholesome brother. Have you eyes? But mildewed ear is also a verbal link to what? What the ghost told Hamlet about how he was murdered. Poison poured in his ear. Do you have eyes? Mother, can you see? Can you compare these two? Here was a mountain. Could you on this fair mountain leave to feed and batten, graze on this moor? Moors in England are high, rocky, desolate areas. They're not good for anything for the most part. You can't grow anything on them. You can let cattle and sheep eat the grass, but that's it. Have you eyes? You can't call it love. That is, what you're doing now, that ain't love. At your age, the heyday in the blood is tame, meaning it's not because you are so, sexually available and you're ovulating, all that kind of stuff. She's old. She's probably gone through menopause. Your blood is humble and waits upon the judgment. When we get to poetry, we're going to read a couple poems that are carpe diem poems, seize the day poems. And they're all going to be about, man, when you're young and you're healthy and you're virile, you just want to, for men, spread your wild oats, so to speak. You want to have sex as much. But when you get old, those poets say, your blood is cold. See, your old blood is like the water in this bottle. I mean, it just swishes and sloshes around. My blood, according to those poets, is like bacon grease that's been sitting in a frying pan for several hours. Turn that frying pan upside down, it doesn't move. It's congealed because I'm dying slowly, right? He says, what judgment would leave this, Hamlet Sr., for this, the brother? I know you have sense, because if you didn't, sense meaning intellectual capability, because if you didn't, you couldn't move. But what's happened to your sense, mother? That sense is apoplexed. It's suffered a stroke. You're not in your right mind, he's saying. For madness would not err, nor sense to ecstasy was ne'er so thralled, but it reserves some quantity of choice. Even if you were crazy, he's kind of implying, you'd still choose better than this. What devil was it, 77, that thus hath cozened you at hoodman blind, like blind man's bluff? What devil, what tempter has tricked you? Eyes without feeling, feeling without sight, ears without hands or eyes, smelling sense, all were but a sickly part of one true sense could not so mope. O shame, where is thy blush? Rebellious hell, if thou canst mutiny in a matron's bones, if you can rise up to flaming youth, let virtue be as wax and melt her own fire. That is, rise up in her, melt her inwardly, proclaim no shame when the compulsive ardor gives the charge. Hamlet, speak no more. Why? He's wrung her heart. He softened her heart. Speak no more. Thou turnest mine eyes into my very soul. And there I see such black and grained spots as will not leave their taint. Where have we heard about black spots before? In tincturing. Oh, that this too sullied flesh. Sullied, spotted, tainted, impure, would thaw, melt, and resolve itself into a dew. We've also heard a related word to taint in the ghost speech to Hamlet, where it says, get revenge against Claudius, and then it says two other things. Taint not your mind. Leave your mother to heaven. Hamlet doesn't take the taint not your mind to heart. He says, I'll wipe away everything I've ever learned and replace it with kill Claudius. Okay? She says, you turned my eyes into my very soul, and there I see such black and grained spots. In the Old Testament, one of the books of Kings, can't remember which one, you get the story of David and Bathsheba. It's important because after David sinned, a prophet comes to him, and I'm going to talk about this in just a moment, and explains to him some things, and David then writes this psalm that I'm going to read parts of in a moment. But if you're not familiar with the story of David and Bathsheba, David's the king of Israel. He's one day up on the roof of his palace, kind of like looking out over the city of David, and he sees a beautiful young woman bathing on her rooftop. Apparently that was, the in thing to do. And rather than averting his gaze from her, he stares at her. He's full of lust for her. He sins for her. My terminology, I don't think I've ever heard this in a sermon, he rapes her. It's pretty clear it's not entirely consensual in the sense of, she's just a lowly, middle-class kind of woman, and this is the king taking what he wants. She's found to be with child. Her husband is his greatest commander, and they're fighting a war, and David decides to bring the husband home from the front so that he can have some R&R with his wife, because he wants him to sleep with his wife so that the baby will thought to be his, the husband's. But the husband, being the great warrior that he is, says, I can't do that. I can't have sex with my wife, not when I've got men dying at the front. I've got to be with them. And David's like, oh, okay. And he goes and sends him into the most heated part of battle. And Uriah is killed. Okay? Well, now that the husband's dead, David takes Bathsheba as one of his wives. He has more than one. That child is born dead. Right? Nathan the prophet comes to David after he does the plot against Uriah and goes, I know what you've done. And David writes, wake up, Psalm 51, which begins, have mercy on me, O God, have mercy on me. According to the multitude of your tender mercies, have mercy on me. Wash away all my iniquity and my transgressions. Cleanse me from my sins. For I know mine iniquities and my sins are ever before me. Against thee only have I sinned and done this evil in thy sight. Okay? So he begs forgiveness. All right? He says he was created evil, born from birth evil, etc., etc. He talks about God cleansing him. And then he says, verse 10, create in me a clean heart, O God. and renew me with a steadfast or guiding spirit. Take not your Holy Spirit from me, he says. Okay? Then will I teach transgressors the ways. And there's a whole progress that we're not going to talk about in this. Towards the end of it, he says, talking about sacrifice. Why? Because in the Old Testament, you sin, you got to offer a sacrifice. He says, a broken and contrite heart, O God, thou wilt not despise. And that wilt not despise, that's a Semiticism. That's a standard way of speaking to a Hebrew. And what it means is just the opposite. So if you will not despise something, what does it mean? You really love this. A broken and contrite heart, God really desires. Okay? Go back to Hamlet. Hamlet says, lost my place. She says, I've looked into my very soul. That is, she sees what David saw. He's rotten and foul and must be cleansed. Okay? Hamlet kind of hears her, but not really. Hamlet says, nay, but to live in the rank sweat of an enseamed bed, stewed in corruption, honeying and making love over the nasty sty, he kind of starts on a roll. It's almost like he hasn't heard what she said. Okay? So, let me back up. To live in the rank sweat of an enseamed bed. Rank, stench, foul-smelling, sweat, bodily sweat of an enseamed bed. Your gloss tells you enseamed, loaded with grease or greased. Does that really help? How many of you sleep in a bed loaded with grease? Yeah, I don't think so. But if you're having sex with a hooker or whore, and I'm going to explain why I'm using that term in a moment, if she plies her wares at a place where the room is rented by the hour, those sheets might not get changed. Listen to the word enseamed. You put one consonant in that word, and it's enseamed. A bed covered with bodily fluids. Pretty foul, pretty disgusting. Okay? Stewed in corruption, and that's why I used hookers or whores. In Shakespeare's day, stew had two meanings. One of them could be a verb, had three meanings. Two of them could be a noun. A verb, to stew something or to be stewing, means to be boiling. There's something bubbling up. Why? Like a stew. You put fruit, vegetables, and meat in a pot with water, heat it, and you have a stew going. Okay? So the verb form is related to that noun. The other noun form refers to the stews, plural. That is the red light district. That is where the hookers worked out of. And there were specific spots in parts of London known as the stews that respectable people stayed away from. Stewed in corruption. Notice it can mean all three of those terms. Stewed, past tense, verb, but boiling up, cooking in corruption, as well as in the stews, the living places in corruption. Honeying and making love over that nasty sty. We only use the word sty for two things today. One, you can get an infection somewhere around your eyelid or nose, and it's called a sty. It grows, it gets big, you have to have it popped or something. The other one is what? Pigsty. What are pigs not known for? Not known. Cleanliness. What they do what? I don't know if you've ever been to a pig farm. They wallow in that filth. And what's that filth? It's not just the ground they walk on. It's the ground they drop all their droppings on. And they roll in it. And what's Hamlet saying about her marriage bed? I mean, it's absolutely disgusting. Speak no more. These words like daggers enter in mine ears. No more, sweet Hamlet. But when Hamlet stopped, when he said stye, you had a dash. Why? Because she interrupts him. But he's on a roll. It's like he hasn't stopped. A murderer of over the nasty stye, a murderer and a villain, a slave that is not 20th part the tithe of your precedent Lord. That is, Claudius isn't 1/20th of 1/10 of Hamlet Sr. You do the math. It's a very, very small percentage. He just keeps going. Why? Why doesn't Hamlet stop until the ghost comes in? What is he finally being able to do that he's not done so far in the play? Other than in soliloquies. And bear in mind, a soliloquy is like he's just thinking it. He tells us earlier in one of his soliloquies, but break heart. Why? Because I must hold my tongue. Now, his tongue has been loosed. He's doing what? He's getting it all out. Okay? I mentioned earlier, talking about some of the religious stuff, about confession. When Claudius was praying, what was he doing? Or attempting to do, let me put it that way. Hamlet says, I can't kill him now because he'll die cleansed. How so? Well, if Claudius was truly repentant and was praying, according to Catholic belief, that act is a good deed. It is a virtuous deed that does what? It draws down the grace of God upon him. If it draws down the grace of God upon him, it's like he's enveloped in grace, clean. Okay? Some Protestants will accept that, even in Shakespeare's day. Calvinists, no. Because Calvinists said grace comes from where? Solely God. You don't do anything to merit grace. God just goes. Saved. And the rest you go to hell. Okay? He just keeps going on about the king. Lost my place. Ghost comes in. A king of shreds and patches, and that's why he's on that roll. And he stops. Save me and over me. With your wings, you heavenly guards. Why? Because now he sees the ghost. What would your gracious figure? And Gertrude's like, he's lost it. Because Hamlet's been talking to his mother. She's been sitting on the bed. And suddenly, it's like he looks towards the door, which is closed. Nobody's come in. He talks to the ghost. Are you here to chide me because I haven't killed your brother? And the ghost says, don't forget. Don't forget what? Two things. I'm here, he says, to whet thine almost blunted purpose. His almost blunted purpose, that is a metaphor for a sword, and he's there to whet it, to sharpen it, like on a whetstone. And look at your mother, Hamlet. Amazement on thy mother sits. Frenzy, distraction, your gloss tells you. How do we know? Well, when Hamlet first told her, quit wringing your hands. I think she's been doing this all along. What does that mean? Frenzy, distraction. She's almost, to use a modern phrase, beside herself. But that works because of something that's going to be mentioned later. What does it mean to be beside yourself? It's a strange phrase when you think about it. It's like you're sitting here, and yet you're also sitting next to yourself. So if you're sitting next to yourself, where's the real you? You are divided. There is no real you anymore, because the you is supposed to be whole and unified. Okay? Hamlet, he says, comfort her. Why? Step between her and her fighting soul. She is beside herself. If Hamlet doesn't stop, what could happen? She could be permanently beside herself, which can mean either dead or crazy. We're going to see somebody have that happen. So, how is it with you, lady? And she's like, how is it with you, Hamlet? I'm fine. That you do bend your eye on vacancy and talk to the air. Hamlet, I'm talking to him. Don't you see him? Who are you talking about? She doesn't see him, she doesn't hear him. The queen says, this is the very coinage of your brain, Hamlet. You're talking to nothing. Your brain has created this image. The thing that you think you see, Hamlet. How do we know she's wrong? Other than, the ghost is here. What's the proof that the ghost is real? There is proof. Or, let me rephrase that. What is the proof that the vision is real? Marcellus, Bernardo, Francisco, and Horatio. They've all seen it. Hamlet's the only one who's talked to it. Okay? She says this is an ecstasy. Hamlet. Ecstasy, remember, means mind leaving the body or the soul leaving the body. Hamlet goes up to her and does this. Feel that? Feel my heartbeat? It's calm. He said, come on, test me. No. He says, line 146, lay not that flattering unction to your soul. Unction, that healing balm, that healing salve. Don't apply that to your soul, that not your trespass but my madness speaks. Don't think that you're here right now with me and everything we've talked about because I'm crazy. How do we know that her soul needs healing? Because she earlier said she looked within and she saw it was pretty black and spotted. Why? Because Hamlet says, if you think everything I've done is because I'm crazy, what will that do to what she saw inside? It'll film over. The only problem is what hasn't been removed. If you get a big sliver of wood, not a splinter, but a big sliver of wood stuck under your skin and it kind of grows over it, what will happen? That's why bullets have got to be removed if you get shot, especially if the bullet brings a piece of clothing inside and that clothing is left. It'll start to fester. Like cancer, it will spread. Hamlet is saying, Mother, we got to get the rot out. Okay? So he says, forgive me this, my virtue, for in the fatness of these pursy times, virtue itself of vice must pardon beg. Oh, Hamlet, and there we get Psalm 51. Thou hast cleft my heart in twain. You've broken my heart open, Hamlet. Hamlet, good. Why? Throw away the worser part of it. A broken and contrite heart, O God, thou wilt not despise. Earlier, create in me a clean heart. That is, take the part that's good, throw away the rot, and then he tells her, don't go to my uncle's bed. Why not? Because if her heart really has been broken, if she really is contrite, what else must she do? See, this is the second part, especially in the Catholic tradition, of confession. You go, you confess your sin to the priest, and then the priest gives you penance. You got to do something. Well, included in that penance, the very first thing is stop. Stop the sin you've been doing. Repent, the word literally means you're going this direction, sin, 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 sin. Turn around, go the opposite direction. That's what it literally means, to turn around. Okay? So what does he tell her? I know you're not virtuous. I know you like having sex with your husband. He says, but pretend to be virtuous. Assume virtue. And Shakespeare gives his audience / readers an instruction on how to break a bad habit. That habit can be drinking, it can be smoking, it can be drugs, it can be overeating. How do you do it? You do it one step / decision at a time. Don't go to your husband's bed tonight. Why? That'll make it a little bit easier tomorrow night. Does that mean she's virtuous tomorrow night? Nope. Don't do it again. And eventually, by assuming a virtue, and by assuming he means putting on like a shirt, that virtue becomes what? Becomes you. In other words, you become virtuous. Sports psychologists will tell you, you want to develop an exercise regime? It takes about 3 weeks of daily doing it. You want to stop being a couch potato weighing 300 pounds? You get off the couch and you go for a walk. That first walk might be 100 yards. And you do it the next day, and you're going to be tired from the first day. And the third day is going to be just a slightly bit easier, but you're still going to be tired. And by the end of 3 weeks, you can walk a quarter mile or a mile and build up, etc. You've developed a virtuous habit. Okay? One last thing. Now, we'll come back to this. We're going to pick up with 203 when Hamlet talks to her about going to England and what he's going to do to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. Sorry for keeping you a minute or so over.